and today there's not really much to say. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag of tricks, but that's a pretty normal day. Sometimes days are good, sometimes days are bad, sometimes but usually it's mixed. Um, so I mean, it was just sort of a mixed day. I just did not wake up feeling well today. I feel sick, and I woke up extremely anemic today. So I've kept up with iron pills today. A little bit more on that than usual because I woke up pretty bad. Um, yeah, I don't really, yeah. So keeping on top of also the other portion of that because you definitely don't want to end up too backed up because iron does that. Um, so, um, Jean made dinner or lunch. He made lunch, and yeah. I mean, as soon as like company left, he was like, "You need to eat this tuna," and I was like, "Okay," because tuna has it's high in iron. It's one of the things that's good. Also, though, my stomach plus lots of vitamins doesn't happen very well. So at least the bleeding subsided a little bit. It was just, yeah, it got pretty damn heavy. Probably because I noticed that I was running low on some other things and I started taking vitamins more, but then the multivitamin, yeah, causes it to get worse. I've noticed that anything that has vitamin C in it, anything that really like assists your immune system, causes it to get worse. So that's one of the reasons why I think that even if the Hashimoto's didn't cause it, that it definitely makes it worse. So, yeah. It definitely makes it worse. And whenever you are, yeah, I can't say that. It's too gross. Just when you are passing clots the size of shits. It's bad. It's really bad. Basically, the lining builds up so quickly, and then it just sheds before it can even finish building, and that's the gross stuff. Um, it's all kind of gross. So yeah, man, you had to pee bad. Sorry. Don't play in there. I don't even know why I say anything. Anyway, I don't know. Today is just a mixed bag, and I just woke up not feeling well. And I hurt, and I don't feel well. And I've had to keep an eye on it because whenever I get so anemic, um, I start feeling like I'm tired and my body is heavy. And it's not a normal tired. It's like I have trouble staying awake. Like, even whenever I'm just sitting there. Jean actually got really worried because as soon as company left, like, I basically started passing out at the table. That's why he was like, "You're eating this tuna now." And I'm like, okay, because, yeah, it doesn't normally get that bad, but I started bleeding pretty quickly and pretty rapidly for a couple days like that. And, one iron pill a day, I guess, just wasn't enough. So I've kept up with it. I've taken 3 of them today, which is what they told me to do think it was like 3 years back now. Um, Whenever they, yeah, no, 4 years back. It was a while ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. Um, it was that time that they ended up, because of this, doing a emergency sort of situation blood transfusion. They had to do a rapid blood transfusion. I didn't even know that this existed before then. Yeah. After I lost my kids, I wouldn't stop bleeding. So I knew that that is probably what caused it. It's just never stopped. Not really. I mean, even whenever it stops, there's always something. It's never right. Nothing is ever. I used to be really regular. I haven't been regular since. And then I'm showing signs of other problems. Like, yeah, bleeding after certain things that you shouldn't bleed after. They've tested me for cancer. No cancer. It's not cancer. They know it's not cancer, but that was the only thing. Cancer, and arguing with me that it cannot be the Hashimoto's. But I know from my experience that even though the Hashimoto's didn't cause this, and very likely didn't, because it's not like it got like extremely worse in that time. I know that I've always had health that responded to extreme situations, like being separated from someone I'm extremely bonded to. It actually almost killed me as a baby because health issues got worse. Like, they were already kind of deadly, and then they got even more deadly, and it didn't matter that my grandmother was an abusive person. My mom was told to take me back because regardless, I was doing well, and as fucked up as it sounds, I almost died because the combination of the lacking in my immune system back then and the febrile seizures. I had the grand mal, and I had a very serious case. And I had both issues at once, and I almost died so many times. But it actually got worse whenever I was separated from my grandmother. And my mom had to deal with this, like, agonizing truth that, like, she couldn't separate us. So to be absolutely clear, my mom did try to protect me from my grandmother, but literally, yeah, not screwing with bonds like that was integral to my survival. It's actually not that uncommon for people to have issues like that, surprisingly. And my phone is saying I forgot I had the battery backup plugged in. You know what? Let's use this instead. So this cord is short. My phone is oh yeah, Munchkin and stickers. So now I'm just trying not to puke everywhere. Anyway, yeah, I just all around don't feel well, and beyond, like, I don't know, every day I miss my kids. There's not a day there's not a moment that goes by that I'm not thinking of them. Even if I'm talking about something else, it's just there. It's always there. In the back of my mind, in the front of like, my mind is always having me multitask. Like, I can think about a million different things, but I'm always worrying about them and wondering and what I've learned to hate the people that did this to us. I've gone over the paperwork so many times. I've gone over the recordings so many times. The pictures, everything. What happened to us wasn't even legal. Like, the judge. The judge, there's this video that floats around YouTube where this judge says a bunch of things, both of them do actually, that should have them removed from the bench. They talk about funding consequences and making decisions based on that instead of a case, or whether there isn't a case. And there was no case. They didn't have anything. They weren't even saying anything that you can even do this for. But this judge just didn't care. And that video with those two judges, my judge was one of those two judges. And I can attest to the fact that she really didn't care if they lied blatantly. Like, we changed their story on the stand. Like, this is... And even what they said was not even something you were supposed to be able to do any of this, like, for. And it was insane. And to this day, I still can't find a lawyer who's willing to pick it up. And I was stopped at filing, trying to do it myself pro se. So I'm just sort of... Yeah, I was told the judge says that I can't do that, even though, like, even after the 6 months, there was enough wrong with the case that there was actually grounds to file, even after, And I looked that up and, like, studied it. I was like... Because I was being stopped all the way up to that point, just... And then after the 6 months, then it was like, oh no, you really just can't do that. I don't, like, it was like they got even more comfortable with this. And, but there are actually grounds under which you can do that. And my case fit actually several different ones, that would allow for an appeal after the 6 months. I was never charged with anything. There was nothing to charge me with. And that's actually pretty common in Arizona. They actually do this to a lot of people. Later, I got approved to basically co-parent Chris, my stepson, my adorable stepson. And I cannot even begin to express anything that I am feeling in regards to that. And all I actually have is PTSD. That's it. That's actually what's on my diagnosis sheet. My actual, where I actually go and get stuff for this. And it's really not what you imagine. I'm one of those people who goes there every few months. And this is where I was at then too. Where you go every few months and they ask you if you're still all right, you're still stable, and you tell them yes. And then you go on your way. And it's not like other states. Like, apparently in some states, and I've actually talked to doctors who are from other states, it'll just be like until you need to come in. But here it's not. You have to go in like every few months, so that they keep you like enrolled so that you can still get what you need to. For me, I was using it to be enrolled in a program that allowed me to use my proclivity for art as also a means to for therapy, basically. Therapy is not about getting over things. I don't understand some people who think that it is, and they think that like what they do can magically be fixed by this. That's not how therapy works. The wounds remain, and some things even time can't heal. If they can, that's just not something I've run into yet. It's just, there are just some things I've found that don't heal. They just remain open. Like a gaping hole you're walking around with. And you can't talk about it. Because then they'll start looking at you for depression like they don't understand that you're just a mom. And when I lost my kids, my periods became irregular and I started bleeding all the time. That's how this stuff started. Some doctors have refused to even acknowledge that Hashimoto's is even part of it because of that. And some just it's because it's already been said, so they don't want to admit that somebody was wrong. So while the Hashimoto's didn't start it, it definitely influences it. And I noticed this because anything that strengthens my immune system, like if I take a multivitamin, it makes it worse. And that's what I'd done because I was low in other things, and I needed those things. So for a few days I took those, and then it got suddenly very, very bad. So that's how I got anemic this morning. It was because I forgot to take my iron pill last night, and I already knew that the bleeding was pretty bad. So whenever it's that bad, it's 3 times a day, and I have to stay on top of it. And even then, if I go get tested, they will test me low. I am literally just taking pills to stay alive at that point. I hope that judge chokes on her funding consequences. And that is my honest. Back then, I would have balked to say such a thing. It would have seemed so horrible to say that about anybody. But going through that every day, always having that there, no matter what else I'm doing or talking about, it's always there. I'm always thinking about them. It's never not. And you go through that every day for years on end, and you learn how to hate people. You learn how to hate all the people that knew what was going on and did nothing. You learn how to hate all the people that you learn to hate as much as you love. And I hate the people that did this to us as much as I love my kids. And there's no words for that. So, if you guys find this one day, just know, even if the courts won't officially recognize that I am still fighting for you, because they just refuse, I'm still looking for a way to bring you home. At no point have you ever been unwanted, or unloved. Even if it probably feels like it sometimes. And I mean, I know it does, because I was there. The system can be a really fucked up place to be. And, I hope it's at least not as fucked up for you as it was for me. Because knowing what goes on, knowing that they don't want to talk about the stuff that gets brushed under the rug, all the horrors that go on, knowing that stuff, I don't have to imagine the stuff that can go on. It's not beyond my imagining, and I wonder if that doesn't make it worse. Because I know some of the things that can happen. I've had friends who survived it as well, and nobody doesn't have something that happened in there that is never supposed to, and they will never admit, but went on and goes on to a lot of people. They're so worried about their reputation that they don't realize that the fact that they don't actually embody that reputation already destroys the reputation. Nobody who's been in that shit speaks well about it, and apparently the only thing that the news could even dig up is some shallow teenager where the homesickness and the emotional stuff hasn't even hit her yet. She's literally just glad that she's with somebody who has money. And this is the sort of thing that they're putting forth and glorifying. Taking kids from people and giving them to people who have more money. That's what Arizona's like. And there actually used to be a commercial, and I found it really interesting that it didn't get put on YouTube. But there was a commercial that ran in Arizona where they were advertising getting into foster care, specifically to adopt. Fostering to adopt. Adoption through foster care. And it was actually advertised as an alternative to going through an adoption agency. This was an actual advertisement that ran in this state. I can't tell you how horrified I was to see that. It was on public television. Like, I guess barely anybody even watches that anymore, so. I mean, I like to think some people. I knew I wasn't the only one that saw it. But damn. It's like, it's not on YouTube. It's like, they think that, like, if they don't put it there, it won't end up there. So if somebody finds it, please make sure it gets there. I regret that I didn't record it. I didn't, like, pull out my phone whenever, you know, I should have. And if anybody else finds it, just make sure it's out there. Because the fact that these are the attitudes that have gone on here, and that this is the sort of thing that has gone on in my state, this needs to be as out in the open as possible. There is nothing about this that should be behind closed doors. And that's what they push for. And it actually came where someone actually tried to pass a new law that prevents them from lying. And lawmakers, like, in the actual thing said, no, we can't do that. They need to be able to lie. And I'm like, what? There's already laws that are supposed to stop them from doing this. All this would be just another law saying the same thing. Like, not only do they not need to lie, they're not supposed to, and they are actually supposed to be arrested for it. Like, this is an actual, like, law-breaking thing. Like, but that never happens. These people don't end up in prison for it, especially in Arizona, where, you know, that video where you'll find those two judges, funding consequences trump best interests of the child, is what it's called. Look for the full video. it's easier to find the ones where people are trying to highlight like what's wrong with it, but find the full video. There's very little that isn't wrong with it. But sometimes it's just that much more real if you just watch the whole thing. Because it's easy for people who don't know what's going on here to assume without seeing it. And, you know, you can look at where people have edited it and you're like, oh, well, they probably just edit out the context. No, they didn't. They're just highlighting portions of it. You can't make this shit up. She literally goes into the details of how she did this one case, and an example. And in this example, she's talking about where a 16-year-old had a baby, and that 16-year-old wasn't in foster care, but the baby was safe, the home was safe, everything was good. They could stay together. Except someone decided that that was not congruent to funding. And so they were separated, and the judge was actually advocating for this and saying remove the baby in the first place. Just remove them, doesn't matter. And this is actually against the law. She should be taken off the bench just for that alone, because she is literally advocating breaking the law. She is advocating making decisions based on funding and not on the case. And she is actually admitting that she makes her rulings based on this in this video. What more? But because this is Arizona, she was promoted to a Supreme Court justice for the state. There is no justice in this state. Not only were we tormented months, it was at least a month longer than the 3 months to even get to court. It was way more than the 90 days. And they played like they hadn't had custody of my kids in court, and they actually said that they had only had them for that long. They took my kids without a warrant and without probable cause. They took my kids, put on the paperwork that my apartment was the problem, told me that it was me, and that it was me having a diagnosis that was the problem. Or, not a diagnosis, they said mental illness. Then they turned around and said that I didn't need to do anything to my apartment, that it was fine. And I still scrubbed it anyway. I was told we can do anything we want, because, you know, whenever I had problems with a stalker, I literally, you have to understand, I cannot see very well. So there isn't even a way that I could even implement specific people in this. I called because I had a problem. Somebody was literally sitting outside my apartment with a clipboard, and I didn't know who it was. And I couldn't see them well enough to even identify them, even if I did know who they were. And they would always drive off before anyone could get close enough to see who they were. And, I mean, I described their car and all that, and I'd never seen this car anywhere else. And in court, they said that I was accusing one of the workers of stalking me. There was also an incident where I had a break-in and they stole my camcorder that I was using to record things, and a bunch of paperwork that had to do with the case. the apartment manager that I had, she first accused me of giving out my key. And I said, I haven't given out the key. Nobody has the key except for me. And then she said, well, they had a right to go into your apartment. And I was like, what? What? Are you saying that you gave someone the key? Who? The police? Who? And, you know, they this was just insanity. They literally gave a CPS worker, or someone at least claiming to be, the key to my apartment. And this is actually against the law. And for them to even obtain this key in such a way is, I mean, to go in there without, this is unlawful. Like, completely unlawful. And they weren't looking for evidence of anything. They were literally destroying evidence. I mean, there's plenty even with that, but I mean, you can't make this shit up. And there was this job that I was working, and they would call my work. And, you know, it was... the worker would call my clinic. She told them that I was doing porn and a bunch of other things that weren't true. But, like, it destroyed and sabotaged my entire support system. And everything just... On top of ripping my family to pieces, they also destroyed everything around me. Like, just... And then, you know, the problem had to be me, right? They didn't even know my kids' names. On the stand. They didn't even know my kids' names. The guardian ad litem didn't even know my kids' names either. Like, nobody who was supposed to even... They didn't even know what was going on. They literally just decided these were just... My kids were just $signs to them. They were just numbers on a page. That was it. They I can't keep talking about this right now. I already don't feel good. I already feel like I'm going to throw up. I don't need to add, I hope the people who did this to us, each and every last fucking one, choke on it. I hope they choke on it. And I hope my ex-husband, who decided to use it for attention and all that, I hope he chokes on his words too. I hope they all choke on all of the fucking lies. I hope... I've given up on humanity at this point. And you know what I found in my research? It actually takes 3 generations for a family to recover. And that's only if they're reunited. It takes 3 generations for a family to even reestablish. To, like, finish even reestablishing. So, like, it takes that long for you to not have this as this big, huge part of your family. And they don't even think twice about this. They do this for the funding in this state. And it's insane. In Arizona, even as they claim that they've changed, still does this. And they still do this to a lot of people. And it's like they think that if they say that they've cleaned up, that it means that this still doesn't happen. And we're just supposed to believe it. But, I've talked to enough people and I've seen enough shit to know that there's still some really fucked up things that go on in the state. and that they may dress nicer. But the fact remains that some of them are still soulless bastards who do this because they can. They abuse a power that they're given that is supposed to be to protect kids and, yeah, families too. And they abuse it. And this is supported by a system that rewards this behavior and often punishes people who stand against it. This is not right. I mean, you know, they're not even supposed to take kids unless like it's really extreme. So even if there is something, just to put it out there, they're not supposed to take them unless this is something that can literally cause that child's death. Okay, so like if they're saying that your house is dirty, dishes in the sink are not supposed to be enough, and trust me. But if they say something, then like you imagine it must be bigger, because why wouldn't it be? The fact of the matter is that some people, they get this sort of power, and a lot of them do, and just there's no accountability whenever this happens. And sometimes they'll just transfer them like the Catholic Church. And, you know, that's actually how this originally happened. The supervisor was originally transferred because apparently she was pushing for the removal of kids who didn't need to be taken just because their parents had diagnosis. And we had one call that came in because my rapist's mom, I guess, the one who said that she didn't know, there's actually an actual record of her calling CPS. She hadn't seen Rowan. She just decided that she would try and get him taken away, I guess. That entire family is fucked up. So I don't know, some people really are just like that. So the supervisor was apparently pushing for it, and the worker said, no. And apparently she got transferred. So that same supervisor, on the day that a worker showed up at my house, they said they were from 2 cities away. They weren't even from like the city that we were actually living in. They were from 2 cities away, and they didn't even investigate. They just said, we're taking your kids. The call that they said happened didn't exist. Or rather, a similar call existed weeks before, and was not even remotely provable. The claims were not that my home was dirty, or that my kids weren't being taken care of. It wasn't that they weren't being fed or anything like that. It was literally a jilted roommate, or because she'd been given notice to get out because she stopped taking her medications and was acting in ways that should not be around. It wasn't bad enough that I could petition her, but it was bad enough to get her out. So, she decided to call and claim that I thought that my cat could turn into a person, like physically transform. And she used language I would never use. So I was accused of saying this thing, and that's literally the reason why they took my kids. And that's the reason that they gave me too. And then they were claiming that, like, they gave me this paper saying that my home wasn't appropriate, but like there was no details on this. There was nothing. There was no specifics on this paper. It was just And then I asked them, what's not good about my home? And they said, you. What? Like, these people get so drunk on power that they do stuff like this. And, like, they made me get rid of my dog. Like, I would literally still have my dog. You know, she had her shots. She wasn't aggressive or anything. You know, she was healthy. She was a rescue. She ended up going with a friend. I actually wasn't sure how she would handle being, you know, having another change in hands. She'd been pretty heavily abused. She was afraid of people. But she'd gotten used to this friend, and she ended up going up and living with them and their mom up in the mountains. So, last I heard, she was pretty happy up there. But I had to get rid of my dog. They made me get rid of Mika. The workers' only reasoning was that she didn't like dogs. That was the only thing that she said. I was never handed a paper telling me anything that I needed to do. Even whenever my lawyer did stand up in court for once. It was like the only time she ever stood for anything, other than just being a useless lawn ornament in a courtroom. Like, she never actually stood up for me or tried to get things to happen the way that they were actually supposed to. But then again, she wasn't even there for a lot of the stuff that she should have been. Like, she was always late. She wasn't even familiar with the case. She literally hadn't even looked at it before you were in that courtroom. I didn't have appropriate representation. My kids didn't have appropriate representation. And it was all just one big horror after another. And in the end, the judge said, you know, that they claimed that, like, it wasn't even the same thing. They just kept on changing what they were saying because they just didn't want to give my kids back. So by the end of it, then they claimed that I was incredibly bonded to my kids and they to me. And then they said that I had a disorder that meant that I couldn't bond, which I don't. And nobody else has ever said this. Like, nobody can even reconcile this with me because this is incredibly opposite of me. And the claim was that I would eventually do something. In the end, they weren't even saying that I did anything. Like, my children weren't harmed in my care. They had food, water, shelter. We had electricity. You know, they had clothes, you know, toys. They played with neighbor kids. Like, the neighbor had some kids their age, and I would take them and we'd sit them out on the blanket and they'd play together. I mean, I had an actual life and a routine, and, you know, they weren't lacking anything. And then this just destroyed our lives. And then, you know, the people say some things to you. They'll say there must be some reason. You know, some people say, oh, you're just mad because this happened. And I'm like, well, yeah, you kind of are mad because this happened. But I was actually speaking out before this happened. There were several times that they told me to shut up, and it didn't matter if I did or I didn't. Like, I did for a while, and it didn't change anything. It was just another thing that they were having a power trip on. It was just another power trip. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter. I mean, I did everything, and then in the end they tried to claim that I wasn't compliant because I wasn't on antipsychotics. But my doctor wouldn't give me antipsychotics because I literally don't have psychosis. And this is not a thing. So this wasn't a thing before either, because they were still pushing the workers were pushing this idea that I thought that my cat could be a person, like physically a human being, like could transform like that character from Sailor Moon that I don't like naming because it feels weird because everybody calls me Luna and it's not at all like related to that. And I've actually been asked if it is. It's not. Everybody calls me Luna. Except for Chris, he calls me Mom. And my kids used to call me Mom. They didn't care about anything except for what they could get away with in separating me and my kids. There were people who said that it was wrong, who saw it and said that it was wrong, and I have that on recording too somewhere. Parent aides and all that, who said that I was a great mom, and this one, she would talk about how, oh, well, they must have gotten to this person and whatnot. Like, her excuse for the fact that nobody did anything about it was that they got to them and blah, blah, blah. Like, it was the mafia. And I don't know, maybe it is. If it is, it's worse than the mafia, because I don't know. Last time I heard, mafia just killed you. They didn't do this. This is worse than death. This is being ripped from your kids like this, having your family torn apart like this. It is worse than death.